Chapter 346, Collecting the Spoils of War. Han Shao was in no rush to leave. When Emily saw Cecilia and the Dark Mantle members slowly making their way over, she felt like she needed to be a bit cautious, maintaining an appropriate distance from Han Shao to avoid rousing suspicion. After all, Emily was the daughter-in-law of the Betteridge family. No matter what she felt towards Han Shao in private, they couldn't let outsiders know of it. Be it Emily or Han Shao, that particular bit of information would only bring them unnecessary troubles in the foreseeable future. After he saw the bone staff in Han Shao's hand, ancient Lizard King Dagaci's attitude towards the latter had grown considerably better. His long years of life had also seemingly forged an incredible level of patience. His expression remained unchanged as he watched Cecilia and the others slowly inch their way over. "I can just take care of these people. If you think they're in the way, it won't take me too long," Dagaci casually remarked. A wicked grin crossed his face as he saw their timid approach. Dagaci's attitude towards Cecilia and the others could only be described as extreme contempt. He wasn't afraid to let them overhear his conversation with Han Shao. For a demigod existence like himself, Cecilia's group were no different than ants in ice, or that only needed a flick of a limb to eradicate. Cecilia and her team had only approached the group because they saw Han Shao and Emily getting along well with the ancient Lizard King. Cecilia's face blanched when she heard Dagaci's offer. She couldn't help but take a few steps back and stare nervously at Han Shao. "No need, they are my colleagues." Han Shao's answer allowed Cecilia to heave a sigh of relief. But only when she saw the ancient Lizard King nod at Han Shao did she slowly walk over to their side. She first nodded at Emily and then spoke to Dagaci. "Powerful being I am of the Lancelot Empire and in charge of dealing with the enemy this time. I have no interest in your words," Dagaci interrupted before Cecilia could make much headway, let alone finish. "Puny human girl, those who dare to invade lie dead. Whatever happens in this area is under my control, and the underground world is not a place for you humans to set foot in. I won't kill you since you're his colleagues, but if you value this temporary amnesty, I hope you leave this world as quickly as possible." Cecilia was about to say more but was quickly stopped by Emily. "All right, little sister Cecilia, as far as I can see we've successfully completed our mission. Even if it wasn't exactly due to our actions, the name of the Redbud Knights will no longer be spoken on this continent. We should definitely leave. We've accomplished a great deed here." Emily desperately winked to signal Cecilia while saying this. Cecilia was no fool. She caught Emily's signal and nodded. She then turned to Han Shao and said bitterly, "I know you spent a lot of effort on this and I will report it in detail to the higher-ups. However, our private grudge isn't over." Shrugging, Han Shao smiled blandly. "Whatever you want." Han Shao didn't care, but the Lizard King immediately rolled his eyes upon hearing that they had a private grudge. A mass of energy as weighty as a mountain emanated from his body, rapidly spreading out. The ancient Lizard King didn't even need to transform into his massive appearance to bring pressure down on Cecilia and her group. "I think I'll still help you kill them. She and you seem to have some grudges. If they never leave the underground world, your words will simply become truth. Then all your problems will be solved. How about that?" The Lizard King loudly laughed and looked at Han Shao as he offered his help once again. His powerful presence alone made Cecilia feel great discomfort. Han Shao felt no goodwill towards Cecilia, however it wasn't to the point of wanting to take her life. Moreover, the relationship between Emily and Cecilia was very good, so Han Shao couldn't kill her in front of Emily. Therefore he again shook his head. "They're my colleagues. Although there are some misunderstandings, we are not enemies. Just let them leave." As Dagaci took back his aura, the sweating Cecilia and her team were able to resume their regular breathing. This time Cecilia didn't wait for Emily's wink before she turned around without another word. As she left, she glanced back at Han Shao and whispered a sentence, "Thank you." Cecilia understood in her heart that if Han Shao hadn't stopped him, Dagaci, who had killed enough Redbud Knights and Dark Elves to form a river of blood, would definitely have exterminated them all with a single gesture. Although she still had some negative opinions about Han Shao, he definitely saved her life this time. Even if and she didn't want to thank her in the depths of her heart, she still had to. Unconsciously, Cecilia's resentment for Han Shao had dissolved a bit. Her heart was full of doubt. She didn't understand how Hansha-O could forge a relationship with such a powerful creature, or how he could make the ancient lizard king listen to his words so easily. Her mind flashed as she suddenly remembered something else. As she left with Emily, Cecilia pulled on Emily's arm when no one was next to them and asked in a low, suspicious voice, "Are you with that Brian?" Emily's heart pounded, her cheeks uncontrollably flared with red. She pretended to calmly tell off Cecilia. "What nonsense are you sprouting? I only worked with him on a couple of occasions and developed a friendship." "Is that so?" Cecilia stared at Emily, puzzled. "It feels odder the more I think about it. Brian's relationship with me is selfish and unfriendly. He shouldn't have helped us last time Castle pursued us. I only discovered later that it was because of you, big sister. It's the same this time. He went to the underground world going through Chrissy just to look for you. He protected only you in the fight before even that big lizard didn't target you with his murderous intent. I know that Brian is no saint. I kept wondering what kind of relationship you two have to make him so concerned about you. I think he only did so because he loves you. Isn't that right, big sister Emily?" "Of course not. What are you guessing madly for? It's just that he wasn't as powerful before and I saved his life once. That's why he's helping me now." "You can stop spouting random nonsense now." Emily strongly denied everything with all her might. She knew that she had to deny things no matter what, or the outcome wouldn't be good for either Hansha-O or her. "Big sister Emily, look at yourself. Why do you still not admit to things?" Cecilia stared at Emily in surprise. Her hand rose, holding a small mirror in front of the latter's face. In the mirror, Emily's face was embarrassed and red with a secret delight, an unconscious response to when Cecilia said Hansha-O only did what he did because he loved her. Emily couldn't help the feelings in her heart from showing on her face. Looking at this bashful and flushing appearance, no one would believe her if she said she had nothing to do with Hansha-O. Seeing that Cecilia's face showed absolute confidence in her theory of Emily and Hansha-O's intimate relationship, Emily softly sighed and said, "Little sister Cecilia, I do have some goodwill towards him. However, you know my situation. I'm the widow of the Betteridge family and my age is greater than his. Even if I harbor affection for him, he won't bother with me. My identity dooms me to be forever avoided by men." Emily heaved and sighed pitifully. Hearing her explain, Cecilia was stunned and came to a sudden realization. To think her big sister Emily's love for Brian was one-sided. Her thoughts spun to a close, and seeing Emily's desolate expression, she hastily spoke. "Big sister Emily, I'm sure this Brian is far from ordinary. With his strength, sooner or later he will grasp immense power. You know that as long as he has enough power, nothing is impossible for him in the Lancelot Empire, rest assured. By then we will also have my grandpa, he can help you too." Emily was genuinely touched upon hearing Cecilia's words, and the last sentence in particular made her heart rejoice. Cecilia's grandfather held a distinguished identity in the Lancelot Empire. If she and Hansha-O were determined to be together in the future, things would go a lot smoother with the old man's help. "Really? If Brian and I can be together, you'll ask your grandfather to help me?" Emily asked, feeling happy in her heart. "Of course, Grandpa dotes on me the most. If I'm willing to help you, he'll help too," Cecilia proudly replied. "Then I'll have to thank you in advance." Emily was overjoyed. Yes, sisters shouldn't be so polite. "Right, tell me about how you saved that cocky brat previously. Now I'm very interested in his matters." Cecilia snickered. While the two women leading the Dark Mantle members away, Hansha-O also crammed all the weapons, armor and money bags that had been sorted out by the skeletal warriors into his space ring. His space ring could only hold a part of them, the rest was stuffed into Celt's space ring. Hansha-O remembered the space ring of the Fire Grand Magus-Mar, so in the end he conveniently asked the old lizard king Dagasi to break its magical enchantment brand and harvested roughly 300,000 gold coins from it. There were also some valuable magical equipment, the most precious of which being a strange tent. The tent looked as if it could only accommodate 2 or 3 people. However, when Hansha-O actually went inside, he discovered that the space was much wider than he'd imagined. It was divided into 3 levels with 100 rooms of various sizes. Each room was clean and brightly decorated, luxurious carpets covering the floor. There were several magic laboratories containing magical equipment on the top level, along with a library on fire magic. There were even 2 storage rooms with a number of fire-attributed magical items. This should be the place where Marceau normally carried out magic experiments. The unassuming tent had turned out to be a valuable space treasure, the area inside no smaller than Han Shou's residence in the city of Bretel. This magical tent was definitely created by the combined effort of a space sacred magister and a grand alchemist. The accommodations of this tent was even much larger than that of the space ring. More importantly, when used for traveling in the wilderness, hundreds of adventurers could stay in it when this tent was set up. For mercenaries who often went out for missions, this kind of space treasure was of a value that was comparable to a divine artifact. This thing is no artifact, but its practical value is even greater than one. If you want it, can sell for at least 300,000 gold coins. The ancient lizard king told Han Shao after understanding the tent's marvelous ability. Such a magical treasure comparable to a divine artifact, I won't be selling it. It's better to keep for my own use, Han Shao replied to the ancient lizard king. After stripping all the dead knights and dark elves of their valuables, Han Shao and the ancient lizard king Dagasi returned to the ruins of the gourd-shaped mountain. Thanks to the Earth Elite Zombie, a tunnel leading out of the underground space had been dug and all of the lizardmen filed out through it. "Where is our great true god?" the leader with the longest tail anxiously asked as soon as Han Shao and the old lizard king Dagasi arrived. Pointing at Dagasi in human form, his long tail swishing through the air, Han Shao smiled and explained, "Isn't that him?" Hearing Han Shao's words, the lizardmen appeared somewhat horrified as they looked at the ancient lizard king. Only when they felt a familiar presence from him did they feel relief and submit. Under the orders of their leader, the lizardmen kowtowed towards Dagasi, their mouths rapidly speaking in lizardman tongue. The old lizard king was no longer bound by the ancient magical formation in his human form. He also rumbled forth in gibberish, conversing with the lizardmen in gratification. Han Shao didn't understand a thing but refrained from speaking. He just stood there with a dry look. The Earth Elite Zombie stood there for a while after leading the lizardmen out and watched the bunch while crudely touching its head. It was even somewhat frightened of the ancient lizard king. Sensing the latter's powerful presence, it silently went to Han Shao's side, pulling the corner of his clothes as it sent him a message. "Is there anything else? If not, let me go back." Han Shao was dumbfounded as he looked at the Earth Elite Zombie who just sent a message to him. He had yet to open his mouth to speak when on the other side the ancient lizard king's attention had been caught by the Earth Elite Zombie. He was stupefied and asked in disbelief, Did this zombie warrior just communicate with you?" "I think so," Han Shao replied. He was also inwardly a little shocked. The Earth Elite Zombie could originally communicate with him, but only in the form of listening and obeying orders. The messages had also been simple reports of the fights, unlike now when it had expressed its own opinion. It appeared that unwittingly the Earth Elite Zombie was gradually developing an autonomy like the little skeleton. This also shows that it was getting stronger and stronger, otherwise it couldn't have developed its own ideas so quickly. If I didn't hear wrong, he wanted to take the initiative to return to the necromancy dimension. He is your summoned creature but also has his own consciousness? The ancient lizard king couldn't suppress his wonder. He could also sense the message sent by the Earth Elite Zombie to Han Shao. "He is different from other ordinary undead creatures. You've also seen it. He can utilize the power of Earth to move freely underground and create tunnels. This has to do with my magical cultivation. I can use this art to alter the summoned undead. It not only gives them higher intellect but also more power and even the ability to evolve." For some unknown reason, Han Shao had a favorable impression of the lizard king. He could feel the latter's passion and trust in him and understood in his heart that he wouldn't harm Han Shao. Therefore Han Shao answered without concealing anything. "Unbelievable. Unbelievable indeed. Even my master couldn't bestow undead creatures with intelligence and the ability to evolve. It seemed your techniques are even more incredible than I'd imagined," Dagasi exclaimed. I also think this art is amazing. I believe that once I break through again I may possess power on par with yours," Han Shao confidently said. He remembered that Chu Kanglan earlier could traverse the moon at the Nine Changes realm. He also understood that the carnal realm would definitely increase his power tenfold or even 100-fold. Very good. I look forward to our next meeting. If I'm still alive, then we will definitely have the chance to meet. Maybe you really can help me at that time, Dagasi said contentedly. He turned back to the lizardman and resumed his quick gibberish. After the lizardman leader listened to Dagasi's words, he turned to Han Shao and said respectfully, from now on us lizardmen of the underground world will follow your instructions. Chapter 347, Becoming a Dark Sun Envoy. Han Shao stayed deep in the underground for several days. With the help of ancient lizard king Dagasi, he collected the magic crystal ores deep within the underground. Han Shao exited the Gourd Mountain ruins when his space ring couldn't hold anymore. This trip to the underground world had bestowed him with rich harvests. Not only was Keltet, but Han Shao had even won the friendship of the lizardman. Han Shao's space ring was also filled to the brim. He'd looted the Redbud Knights thoroughly, as well as the wealth that Kelt had accumulated over many years, and some of Arlen's magic equipment as well. The total harvest, if converted to gold coins, would amount to more than 2 million. Alright, I will leave the underground world for now and collect the rest of the ores next time I come back. I'll also bring more weapons for you in my next visit so you can resist the Dark Elves' invasion, Han Shao said to the lizardman leader. Next time you come, I should already have left this underground world. I hope for the chance for us to meet again. I also hope you can take care of them for me, Dagasi reminded as he looked at Han Shao about to leave. Rest assured, I will help you take care of them, Han Shao agreed with a vow. In the past couple of days, Dagasi had been like a kind elder, imparting Han Shao with many interesting things. Han Shao had unconsciously developed favorable impression of Dagasi. Now as he was about to leave, he actually felt somewhat reluctant. From Dagasi words, Han Shao knew that this time the old lizard didn't simply intend on leaving the underground world. He seemed to want to depart the plane containing the profound continent. Dagasi only glossed over some of the deeper secrets and didn't tell Han Shao much. Han Shao couldn't understand the thoughts of the demigods, so he didn't pursue things to the end by asking too many questions. He only faintly understood that the power of Dagasi's enemy was just as much terrifying. Han Shao's farewell to Dagasi was cool, calm, and didn't drag on. He didn't remain in the underground world after leaving the area. Ji followed the old road back to the surface by using his astounding memory. Han Shao didn't encounter anything out of the ordinary along the way. He occasionally met a few attempts of others' races wanting to rob him and used heavy-handed methods to kill them instead. He easily made his way back to the dark forest. Having stayed in the underground world for more than 10 days, Han Shao felt a comfortable sensation as if he was being reborn when he saw the sun shining above his head. The warm sunlight shone down, lifting his mood into an extremely happy state. The dark forest was rich with lush green trees mixed with exotic plants. Fragrance overflowed in the warm spring light and permeated the heart with a peacefulness that refreshed the mind. Han Shao luxuriated in this warm and comfortable feeling that was a far cry from the gloomy humid underground world, heading for the direction of the Cemetery of Death. When he was back in the Cemetery of Death, Han Shao didn't linger and went directly to Bretel City. Rich harvest in hand, he immediately set up a small meeting with little fatty Jack Dorcas as well as Falk and Chester. You were gone all of a sudden for more than 10 days. Where did you go? Jack had the closest relationship with Han Shao, so he started peppering the latter with questions immediately. I made a trip to the dark forest. Have things been quiet in Bretel City recently? Han Shao smiled slightly and didn't hide his trip to the dark forest. Only the existence of the Cemetery of Death remained under wraps. The Redbud Knights and Dark Elves had suffered heavy losses in the underground world. However, a small number of them had still escaped. News of Han Shao's actions in the underground world must have spread already. Dick, the local Dark Mantle liaison, bowed respectfully toward Han Shao and said, "My lord, I would like to report some information alone. This is all our own people here. There is no need to hide anything. You can speak directly." Han Shao knew Dick must have gathered some information from his higher-ups. Jack Dorcas, Falk and Chester were all his trusted people. Since Falk had been sent here by Lawrence. The latter must have mentioned Han Shao-Oh's identity as a Dark Mantle member to Falk already. Han Shao had nothing to hide in front of him. Jack and Dorcas had spent much time with Dick lately, so they more or less knew of his identity. The existence of Dark Mantle in the Lancelot Empire wasn't much of a secret. Although people didn't talk about it openly, they all knew about it in their minds. Master Candide relayed that your deeds in the underground world are highly appreciated. The Dark Forest is on the edge of the border of our empire. For the Redbud Knights to suffer heavy losses, even though the Brute Business Alliance will likely be extremely indignant, they presumably won't make any radical responses. Master Candide told you to be at ease. Dick started his report when he saw Han Shao was nonchalant about his privacy. Nodding his head, Han Shao smiled. You may carry on. Dorcas, Jack and Falk listened but couldn't understand anything. However, Falk and Dorcas knew that Candide was one of the three heavyweights of Dark Mantle. From Dick's words, they knew Han Shao's relationship with Candide wasn't superficial. They were inwardly amazed. Master Candide said, this time you achieved a great deed. This time, His Majesty has approved that you will be a one-star Dark Sun envoy from now on. You only need to visit the Dark Mantle headquarters to upgrade your badge. Congratulations to you, my lord. Dick's face was full of worship as he grew excited himself. Dark Sun envoy, it seems that Cecilia didn't conceal any of my credit. This woman knows what to do. Han Shao smiled contentedly and murmured to himself. Going from star to moon was one level, from moon to sun was another. Becoming a Dark Sun envoy meant that from now on Han Shao was officially a high-ranked member of the Dark Mantle and was now able to enjoy even more special treatment. He could recruit his own subordinates and redistribute the organization's members in a location. My lord, Dark Sun envoys have the rights to assign missions to Dark Star members and can directly bestow credit on them and raise their level. Chester looked excitedly at Han Shao and stated a reminder. Rest assured, now that I'm a Dark Sun envoy, you will naturally receive some benefits. Han Shao laughed as he responded, then turned to Dick. Anything else apart from this? Master Candide said, you don't have to worry about anything else. He will help deal with the detrimental remarks against you. You only need to take good care of Brettle City. Dick hesitated a little before answering this time. Nodding his head, Han Shao appeared to understand it completely. He was aware that Cecilia had reported everything correctly, even last time's matter when he stopped her from acting against the forest's rules. All right, I understand. Han Shao looked at Dorcas and Falk asked, how is the situation in Brettle City recently? Have the mountain people come down from the mountain? Any action from the 7 Grand Duchies? A total of 20,000 people have come down the mountain and are currently residing in Brettle City. The 5 chiefs of the mountain people are actively cooperating, so the process is going smoothly. The fighting in the 7 Grand Duchies had slowly subsided. Only Helentina of Helen Duchy has been struggling with the rebels within her land. However, it's drawing close to an end now, Dorcas replied. Ever since Dorcas joined the army, he had gradually replaced Falk's position due to his own efforts and Han Shao's deliberate arrangements. Dorcas was a military man through and through and had never hidden this desire to fight. Due of many years of formal military education, he was much more adept in leading operations than Falk, who had originally a knight. Falk also understood in his heart that Dorcas was superior to him in this aspect. Coupled with the fact that the latter had won Han Shao's trust, Falk was powerless against this gradual shift in power. Fortunately, Han Shao didn't mistreat him, letting Falk form his team of trusted confidants and strongest soldiers in Brettle into a brigade of 1,000 knights. Han Shao provided this knight brigade with the most luxurious equipment. Their armor, weapons and equipment were all the most expensive in Brettle City. Han Shao had poured a great deal of resources into this brigade as it was equipped with the best goods currently in the market. Currently his investment stood at 300,000 gold coins. Except for a lack of horses, just based on the equipment alone, this brigade was no inferior to the official royal knights of the empire. Of course, when compared to the top 10 knights associations in the profound continent, this brigade was far inferior in whether fighting power or equipment. However, in Brettle City or even in the 7 Grand Duchies, this fledgling brigade couldn't be underestimated. As a pure knight, nothing moved his heart so much as commanding an official knight brigade, so Falk didn't feel too much unpleasantness at the loss in military power. On the contrary, he poured his heart into training the brigade. So for the time being, the 7 Grand Duchies seemed to have not enough power to deal with us. Han Shao asked with a smile. Nodding his head, Dorcas confirmed the 7 Grand Duchies won't do anything for at least a month. But when they start to act again, it won't be just one duchy coming alone. News of the 4 great bandit regiments suffering heavy losses has spread all over the 7 Grand Duchies. Even if each duchy puts all their strength behind an attack, their power still can't compare to the combined force of the 4 great bandit regiments. With the bandits' defeat as a lesson, they definitely won't act rashly before they are completely confident. Dorcas continued after a short pause. In other words, the 7 Grand Duchies won't act now, but once they do, I'm afraid Bretel City would face a hard battle. HMPH. The 7 Grand Duchies want Bretel City to be their hunting ground. I think it's time to change this perspective of theirs. Only when we kill each and every one that comes will they commit this to their memories for the rest of their lives, Han Shao said with a cold face. He was silent for a while after, then suddenly spoke to Dorcas and Falk. Make good use of this time period when Bretel is still safe to train your soldiers. Make the bandits that have invaded Bretel in recent years your target. I know that beside the 4 great bandit groups there are also 7 or 8 smaller bandit groups. All of you can think of ways to make them spit out everything they looted from us. Dorcas' eyes sparkled with a fierce light after he heard these words. He immediately replied, my lord, rest assured I know what to do. Hey, from my trip to the underground world this time, I suddenly realized that in order for Bretel City to quickly become powerful, the fastest way is to plunder the resources from others. Train our soldiers on one hand, plunder others on the other. We get the best of both worlds in this world. Han Shao made a fortune on dirty money in the underground world. He finally understood why there were so many bandits in the 7 Grand Duchies. Even one of the top 10 knight troops of the mainland, the Redbud Knights, didn't mind traveling thousands of miles all the way to the dark forest. My lord, I have some interesting news. Dick put on a creepy smile as he spoke to Han Shao with a smile. When he saw Dick smile despicably, Han Shao knew the words about to come out from his mouth were definitely nothing serious. He wasn't angry, however. What interesting news? I can't help but want to beat you after seeing that smile. Hey, the Narsen Duchy was originally friendly with the Helen Duchy, but they seem to have been extremely unhappy with each other lately. Grand Duke Benedict of the Narsen Duchy didn't even help Valentina with her internal strife. Do you know why, my lord? Dick looked at Han Shao with an evil cackle. Furrowing his brows, Han Shao said, why? It's to your credit, my lord. Now all the 7 Grand Duchies know that you've had Valentina Benedict an ardent pursuer for many years. Also knows he has been pursuing Valentina for so long in vain, but my lord was able to have her after having just arrived at Bretel City a few months ago. For Benedict, a used woman has naturally lost her flavor. His attitude towards the Helen Duchy also changed greatly. He only stood on the sidelines to watch when Valentina faced her enemies. Dick explained while laughing, then he sighed. My lord is very far-sighted, easily splitting up the 2 most solid allies. Indeed, my lord has great vision. We lack his charisma and definitely have to learn from my lord. Chester had the same look of admiration on his face as he nodded and sighed emotionally. Han Shao's expression darkened. He looked at these innately dirty fellows and grunted, so you spread this news? I didn't think you would be so despicable. Chester and Dick laughed awkwardly without a word, while Jack was full of interest and said with envy, Brian, I heard that that woman is very beautiful. You are really blessed. It appeared these fellows wouldn't believe his explanation, so Han Shao didn't try to explain himself anymore. He took out Kelt's space ring with all the armor from the Redbud Knights along with an enormous amount of magic crystal ore and said to Jack, this ring is loaded with armor from the Redbud Knights and magic crystal ore. You go put them in the warehouse and keep the ring. You are giving this space ring to me? Jack looked with surprise at Han Shao handing over the space ring, his voice high. This ring originally belonged to the Redbud Knights leader Kelt. The space inside is enough for you to transport goods. Han Shao smiled at Jack, then took out Fire Grand Magus Marceau's space ring and handed it over as well. There are a number of crystals, jade and a variety of jewelry inside worth nearly 1 million gold coins. They are to be used as the capital for Bretel's operations. You have full control over them. Jack sensed Kelt's space ring and discovered the massive amount of armor and magic crystal ore inside. He smiled excitedly at Falk. Falk, you can have even better armor now. The magic crystal ore inside is also enough for our magic crystal cannons to use for a while. Very good. His lordship took one trip outside and truly really rich harvest. Fogg let out a happy cry hearing Jack's words. There were the harvested ore armor from the dead Redbud Knights plus the crystal jade and gold coins that Kelt had plundered from the underground world in Kelt and Marsu space rings. Han Shao had stored some magical equipment, the starry sky and the magical space tent in his own space ring. The things he gave Jack were all related to money, as they didn't provide any practical uses for Han Shao. Bretel City was currently his greatest asset. What he cared about the most was to make Bretel more powerful. These gold coins would fully demonstrate their value in Jack's hands. "Good, I'm counting on you to make good use of these things," Han Shao said to Jack and the bunch. With these things he knew that Bretel City would become even more powerful. Chapter 348, Demon Rearing. 5 days passed and Fabian arrived at Bretel City followed by a group of merchants. They had brought far more goods this time than their previous trip. The enthusiasm of the merchants who had tasted an untapped market far exceeded Han Shao's expectations. Every merchant had brought along a caravan this time. Each had carriages pulled by earth dragons laden with bags of various sizes. Inside the various pouches were goblin missiles and sacks full of crossbows and arrows. The goods on the carriages at the rear were wrapped tightly in canvas. Although from the look of the bulky packages it didn't take a genius to figure out that each carriage held ammunition and lots of it. 2 large and slow-moving earth dragons pulled a carriage each 5 meters wide and 10 meters long. Each of these gigantic carriages were large enough to accommodate 10 battle wagons or catapults. The carriages being pulled by the dragons contained at least 20 battle wagons, while the 27 smaller carriages behind them were pulled by war horses. Although these 27 carriages weren't as large as the ones pulled by the earth dragons, each was large enough to accommodate 3 battle wagons apiece. Located even farther back were cloud-mound beasts. Extraordinarily, these creatures were just as strong as the earth dragons but also just as slow. They were twice as large as war horses, each long leg as large as elephants. They carried sacks full of food and daily necessities. These should be able to replenish Bretel City's warehouses. The number of merchants had doubled compared to last time, each wearing a smile that only grew wider as they drew closer to the city. They all wore casual expressions, each talking about their soon-to-be profits. They hadn't encountered a single corpse on the road from Seamist City to Bretel City, nor did they see hide nor hair of bandits. After Dorga's extermination campaign, all the bandits had been eradicated. Those who cooperated had been conscripted as hard-working janitors working to keep the roads free of detritus. When they noticed these subtle details, the merchants began to gradually relax. When they reached the city, Jack, Bretel City's finance minister, paid the merchants in one lump sum after completing an inventory of the delivered goods. The merchants who had come such a long distance were utterly delighted to receive their money. They didn't immediately leave Bretel City but nagged Jack to allow them to open a store in Bretel City. "Jack, the Boost Merchant Guild also plans to open a branch here. Help us prepare a suitable location," Fabian said to Jack. "Understood. The branch of the Boost Merchant Guild will be the first to be arranged," Jack promised, smiling. Despite the objections of the nearby merchants, he covertly brought Fabian aside, sneakily asking, "These merchants have finally come to their senses and want to set up shop in Bretel City?" Ever since the 4 great bandit groups had been defeated, Bretel City has become known as a merchant's wonderland after our painstaking marketing campaign. To be frank, the mines surrounding Bretel City are rich in resources. As long as we have enough smiths, Bretel City will certainly be able to use these resources to create weapons. Bretel City is also the closest juncture to the 7 Grand Duchies. As far as the nobility of the 7 Grand Duchies were concerned, the Lancelot Empire's ornate clothing and porcelain were luxury products that they were willing to spend large quantities of money on. On the other hand, the hardy horses, furs and jewels produced by the 7 Grand Duchies are also very much in demand by the Lancelot Empire. If it wasn't for the fact that Bretel City's safety could not be guaranteed, the ideal location of this city would have propelled this city to becoming the place to be for merchants. Now that word of the 4 bandit groups' defeat is spreading, along with the guarantee of safe passage, many merchants will start to willingly seek out Boost Merchant Guild to sell their wares here. Just wait and see, this is only the first wave. As long as Bretel City can give the merchants a sense of safety, more and more merchants will come flocking. At that time we'd be hard pressed to even try stopping activity. Fabian explained to Jack. It seems that our choice was a wise one. The little fatty smiled until his small eyes were nearly creases upon hearing Fabian's words. Guess what? Brian made a trip to the underground world a while ago. Do you know how many valuable things he brought back? Haha, I now have 2 million gold coins at my disposal. If we include the crystals and other valuables, then the money at my disposal reaches 3 million. I would never have thought that I would be able to one day control so much money. Fabian was visibly shocked upon hearing Jack say these words, then sighed. Follow Brian. Well, you little brat. The very fact that he's given you so much money to look after is proof of his trust. As long as you work hard, becoming a noble is only a matter of time. Rest assured, uncle, I know what to do. The crystals, gold, silver, jewels and other valuables have to be sold through the merchant guilds. Brettel City is an iron stronghold as long as we have enough money, Jack replied. There are a couple of merchants here who probably have an interest in your products. You should find them and negotiate directly. Fabian laughed and said, we're off to see Brian. Phoebe asked me to bring him a few things. Go on in. He's waiting for you, Jack replied. Fabian soon found Han Sha-o's room after leaving Jack. Han Sha-o was waiting impatiently as he already knew that Fabian was coming. Han Sha-o welcomed Fabian in as soon as the latter's footsteps sounded. Smiling, he said, Mr. Fabian, did Phoebe ask you to bring me anything? Of course. This space ring contains what you need. Fabian laughed, handing Han Sha-o the space ring. Han Sha-o focused his mental strength into the space ring and immediately joined Fabian in laughter. Take this sword to Phoebe for me. Be careful and make sure that nothing happens along the way. Taking out the divine weapon Starry Sky, Han Sha-o handed it over to Fabian with a warning. This is the divine weapon Starry Sky, formerly of the leader of the Redbud Knights cult. You should know its value. Fabian's expression immediately grew serious as he realized what he was holding. He stored Starry Sky into his own space ring, saying, rest assured, I will definitely bring this sword to Miss Phoebe. Tell Phoebe to continue collecting the things on this list. Han Sha-o once again took out a list and handed it to Fabian. Understood, I know what to do. Fabian tucked the letter away, continuing to reassure Han Sha-o. After Fabian took his leave, Han Sha-o found Chester and gave him some instructions, then returned to the Cemetery of Death. The Cemetery of Death was immersed in the aura of death all year round. A large oval hole had appeared amongst the white bones. The hole was surrounded by 12 colorful banners, each around 10 meters tall and still managing to flutter despite the complete lack of wind. Each banner was emblazoned with an exotic symbol. The oval pit was filled with large bone spikes, all sticking upwards. Some of these bones had been pulled from the green dragon's corpse by Han Sha-o, while the others came from the taboo land from last time. All of the bones were from deceased powerful magic creatures. Han Sha-o dumped buckets of black and shimmering violet liquid into the oval pit. Bucket after bucket were dumped in. Han Sha-o seemingly having an endless supply from his space ring. All of it went inside the pit. This liquid was either metallic smelling blood or juices of a much more gruesome nature. It came in many colors and the smell was far from flattering. After tens of buckets had been dumped into the pit, Han Sha-o took out a dagger and shallowly slit his wrist. He held it over the hole as drops of fresh blood dripped from his arm. As Han Sha-o's fresh blood splashed into the hole, the liquid began to emit red smoke. Surprisingly, the drops of Han Sha-o's blood didn't diffuse, instead swimming around like red agates. The tranquil liquid began to bubble, catalyzed by Han Sha-o's blood as crackling filled the air. Han Sha-o tilted his head up and whistled a long, low dragon's cry that promised of sinister things to come. The demon slayer red shot out from the nape of Han Sha-o's neck, bringing with it the ghosts of the fallen. The silently flailing and screaming ghosts resembled a nest of snakes as they were drawn into the 12 banners. After hundreds of ghosts were absorbed by the banners, a killing aura began to drift out from the banner, slowly rising to the skies. The killing aura seemed to be attracted to the liquid in the hole, arcing down into the hole at a speed visible to the eye. With the help of this killing aura, Han Sha-o's originally emulsified blood gradually dissolved into the liquid contained within the hole, soon vanishing without a trace. Taking a deep breath, Han Sha-o circulated his magical yuan towards the wound on his wrist, watching as the cut made by his dagger rapidly healed. Taking out the skeletal staff, Han Sha-o began to rapidly chant an incantation. 3 horsed evil knights suddenly appeared in front of Han Sha-o. He pointed his staff at the hole in the ground. The contract-bound evil knights didn't hesitate, jumping in one after the other into the hole. When the first evil knight and his horse landed in the the pit the previously silent knight and horse suddenly threw their heads back in a soundless roar. Not a sound came out of the pit as the two wailed, the knight's bronze-colored armor and horse sizzling as they came in contact with the liquid. Both of them gave off clouds of smoke which rose high into the air. The evil knight and his mount appeared as if they were suffering the worst pain imaginable. The evil knight, who normally would not dare violate the contract, suddenly attempted to break the power of the contract, trying to leave the hole that caused him so much suffering, his body twisting and thrashing in his agony. The evil knight wasn't a lowly existence like the skeleton warriors. These strong fighters had their own version of intelligence in their dimension. Although their prodigious strength was restricted by the magical contract, the harrowing pain that exceeded that of death forced him to instinctively struggle against the contract. Han Sha-O cursed under his breath as he held the skeletal staff. How can you be reborn if you don't suffer this kind of pain? You don't know what's good for you. You'll know what this pain has brought you after you've been tempered and your body reforged. Just the materials required for this 12 demon rearing fragments formation costs at least 100,000 gold coins. Stop struggling. As Han Sha-O cursed, he used his consciousness to suppress the evil knight's struggles and force the other two evil knights into the pit as well. Just like the first evil knight, the other two evil knights who were forced into the pit also began resisting due to the overwhelming pain, attempting to break the contract Han Sha-O held over them. Han Sha-O could easily deal with a single evil knight's rebellion. However, if 3 evil knights and their steeds resisted as a group, then even he would have trouble dealing with them. Han Sha-O was forced to use all of his available mental strength to firmly suppress their combined assault on the magical contract. 9 cycles of demon reincarnation. Scattered souls, return to your positions. Reduce. Even as Han Sha-O used his mental strength to yank the evil knights back under control, he still had to split some effort out to manipulate the spell. After he spat out the words, the killing or drifting out of the 12 banners began to thicken. The mysterious patterns that the banners were inscribed with began to form faces. Under the infusion of the ghost's power, 12 sinister demon faces gradually appeared. Although each demon's face was unique, they had one frightening similarity. They struck fear into the hearts of men and women alike. These 12 demon faces were identical to the demon heads that had entered Han Sha-O's body when he advanced to the separate demon realm. After the 12 grimacing demon faces had all appeared on the banners, 12 demon heads slowly emerged from Han Sha-O's body, floating in front of their respective faces. After the 12 demon heads had returned to the banners from Han Sha-O's body, the killing aura exuded by the banners suddenly swirled into a vortex, gathering in the center of the central pit. The 3 knights and their mounts felt like their souls had suddenly been set afire. Their pain had doubled and they began to struggle even more fiercely against the contract that bound them. Han Sha-O froze in place, barely managing to put the skeletal staff away. He sat in place in front of the pit, using every iota of his formidable mental strength to suppress the evil knights and their steeds. In the pit, the evil knights swung their bone lances wildly as if wishing to decapitate Han Sha-O that very instant. Chapter 349, The Dignity of the Little Skeleton in the Other Dimension. Despite the complete absence of wind, 12 large banners fluttered vigorously in the wind. Baleful aura swirled around, flowing like mercury towards the pit in the middle. Inside the pit, the liquid boiled like fire, royal, searing the 3 evil knights and their mounts and sending smoke billowing into the air. Han Sha-O closed his eyes as he sat facing 3 evil knights. His mental strength flowed like an unstoppable river, holding the 3 evil knights true to their contract. As the mounts of the evil knights were weaker, they gradually lost the strength to continue struggling fruitlessly. 3 enormous bone spurs continued to madly thrust at Han Sha-O. A millisecond of relaxation and the evil knights would ruthlessly exploit the advantage to pierce right through Han Sha-O's head. Han Sha-O was fully focused on his task, iron-willed to the end. Inextricable patterns of mental strength weaved into a formless net in the sky, grinding away at the mountain of resistance that was the will of the 3 evil knights. The cemetery of death wasn't touched by either the sun or moon, eternally shrouded in faint dim light. Hence one could never sense the passage of time. After an indeterminate amount of time, the 3 bone lances struggling to reach Han Sha-O slowly lost their strength. Like the bodies of the evil knights, they listlessly fell back into the pit. Han Sha-O's whole body looked like it had been carved from stone, not a single sign of life from his cross-legged position. The 12 banners still absorbed ghosts and radiated killing aura that converged on the pit. After what felt like a few days, the bodies of the three evil knights completely dissolved into the liquid with not a trace left behind. At long last Han Shao moved, a gasp of air escaping his lips as his eyes opened. His voice was haggard with exhaustion that was so damn tiring. It had only been 3 evil knights and their mounts, but the process of reforming their bodies had already caused Han Shao this much trouble. It seemed that Han Shao's initial hypotheses were true. It was impossible to use demonic arts to reform every undead creature's body. For one, this kind of refining used overly complex and highly precious ingredients. If the countless skeleton warriors and zombie warriors under Han Shao's command were to all be refined, even his prodigious savings wouldn't be enough to support it. Just refining these 3 evil knights already cost at least 100,000 gold. Refining every skeleton warrior and zombie warrior would drive him to bankruptcy and beyond. Even then he still wouldn't be done. Also, refining undead creatures in this manner took too much of his time and energy, with very little benefits to such an enormous undertaking. After all, skeleton warriors and zombie warriors were essentially cannon fodder. Even he rendered them immune to light magic's corrosive effect. Their usage was limited. As such, Han Shao wasn't willing to waste mountains of gold on them. Evil knights were currently the strongest undead creatures that Han Shao could summon. Even within undead creatures, they were considered high level. They had great utility and flexibility once their fire-breathing steeds could take the field with them. Their monstrous innate strength could be combined with hardy armor to produce a combatant that was tougher than a human knight. Han Shao had already had to use all of his mental strength to suppress the fierce resistance of 3 evil knights and their warhorses. While Han Shao could summon bone demons and old Fey zombies, he definitely couldn't refine 3 of them at one go. This was because the resistance from the bone devils and old corpse demons would definitely be stronger. Standing up from his cross-legged position, Han Shao summoned the 12 demon heads from the banners with a thought. Howling, they reluctantly returned into Han Shao's body. Since the bodies of the 3 evil knights were already merged into the pit, Han Shao didn't need to suppress the matrix with his magical yuan any longer. The 12 demon heads had formed when Han Shao had reached the separate demon stage, using the large baleful aura within the Valley of Sunshine as a catalyst. These 12 demon heads innately contain vicious killing intent. Every demon head formed from the last vicious obsession of many hateful souls. It was the best ingredient to refine the mystical demons that were one level above the Yin demons. Of the 3 previously refined Yin demons, there was currently only usable one left. Han Shao was convinced that one Yin demon was far from adequate to maintain his battlefield advantage. When he'd advanced to the separate demon realm back at the Valley of Sunshine, Han Shao had deliberately saved the boundless murderous aura, coagulating it into the 12 demon heads. When the ingredients needed to refine mystical demons were gathered, the 12 demon heads would be used as the base ingredient for the mystical demons. After making sure the area would operate without supervision, Han Shao headed for the specialized area for refining original demons and Yin demons. He first summoned the Earth Elite Zombie, commanding it to modify the layout of the Yin demon cave, molding it into a cave suitable for cultivation mystical demons. When the modifications were complete, Han Shao took out the ingredients he needed and placed them in the centers of the formation eyes around the cave. Once he had completed all the preparations, Han Shao dismissed the Earth Elite Zombie and placed 12 drops of his own essence blood into the mystical demon cave. The blood essence began to revolve in mid-air within the mystical demon cave. The 12 demon heads emerged from Han Shao's body at his command, each swallowing a drop of blood essence. As if at some unknown signal, the cave's enormous energy began to activate. Han Shao then summoned a few hundred wraiths and tossed in a few spirits from the demon slayer edge to act as fodder for the mystical demon's evolution. Han Shao then dug deep into his magical yuan reserves, pouring the remnants into the mystical demon cave to maintain its normal operations. When the 12 demon heads began to howl and rip at the wraiths and spirits in the matrix, the exhausted Han Shao returned to the center of the cemetery of death. The 2 matrices had now resumed normal operations. Han Shao had not only expended a large amount of mental strength but also used significant amounts of magical yuan and blood essence. This was even more exhausting than when he'd fought against Kasi at Bretel City. At that time he had the little skeleton, the Earth Elite Zombie and the Fire Elite Zombie assisting him. But something like this refining process was something only he could handle. As a result he was bone deep exhausted. Sitting on the ground in the cemetery of death, Han Shao pondered for a moment and took out the skeletal staff, meticulously examining the tricolored skeletal staff. He wanted to make use of this interlude to examine the secrets of the skeletal staff. Calamity Church's necromancer Archmage Wolf as well as ancient lizard King Dagasi had seemed to know traces of the skeletal staff's origin. This skeletal staff, which had transformed from the Eye of Darkness, was the key to opening the cemetery of death. It definitely held many hidden secrets. Han Shao hadn't possessed the skeletal staff for a long time. His understanding of the skeletal staff only went as far as seeing that it enhanced his necromancy magic. If not for the necromancer Archmage Wolf using the skeletal staff's power to rejuvenate his life, Han Shao would perhaps never have guessed that the skeletal staff could have such an effect. Skeleton staff, oh skeletal staff, how many secrets are you hiding? Han Shao mumbled to himself as he stroked the three-colored skulls. The exhausted Han Shao fell unconscious. He semi-consciously felt like he'd been shrouded by the tea-colored light from the skeletal staff spinning him around. Colorful light streamed quickly past his body. It felt like he was falling from a great height into an endless abyss. Just when Han Shao felt nauseous from the dizzy feeling, he suddenly sensed a familiar smell intrude on his consciousness. This smell seemed to come from an area of the abyss he'd fallen into. Han Shao's groggy consciousness latched firmly onto the familiar smell, gradually sinking back into unconsciousness. There was an infinite black void in the distance. The surroundings seemed to have been forever shrouded in torpid gray and black cloud constantly rolled over the horizon. The whole area was filled with the smell of death, desolation and wilderness. Swamps and tree husks that were void of branches and leaves dotted the landscape closer to him. A variety of undead creatures stumbled across the wilderness, aimlessly wandering in the desolate space. There was no cycle of day and night in this desolate place, nor any sense of time. There was only loneliness and despair, deathly stillness and desolation. For a moment Han Shao thought he was still within the cemetery of death. It was too similar to the cemetery of death's everlasting dusk. But when a pack of gargoyles soared over his head, followed by a horde of skeletons and zombies on the ground, Han Shao was suddenly struck by the very real fact it wasn't indeed the cemetery of death. He clearly remembered that he hadn't summoned these low-level undead creatures in the cemetery of death. Han Shao suddenly felt like he was in a dream. Only when he followed this line of thought to its end did he realize he didn't have a body existing as just pure awareness. However, as soon as Han Shao thought about his body, his exhausted mental strength slowly filled the area of his consciousness. The identical copy of his body rapidly coalesced into being. His left hand touched his right, both hands obviously making contact. However, Han Shao didn't feel any contact between his skin. Everything felt so strange. But he felt a sense of intimacy towards the surroundings. As for what felt intimate, he couldn't quite place his finger on it. The dense horde of undead creatures suddenly charged down from a bare mountain. These undead creatures were ranged neatly in order. Right at the front were skeleton warriors and zombie warriors. Behind them were skeleton archers and rows of gargoyles. Even further back were two evil knights. These undead creatures actually numbered 3,000 or 4,000. However, the majority of them were skeleton warriors, zombie warriors and ghouls. Only a small portion were hate warriors and evil knights. Charging down from the towering mountain, they flocked towards a steep canyon. Han Shao's body and consciousness slowly floated into the canyon. Only when he reached the canyon did Han Shao realize that the interior of the canyon was similarly flooded with undead creatures. Right down the center of the canyon was a pitched melee of undead creatures. Claws and teeth were used to their fullest potential as they wrestled and tore at each other, incapable of feeling pain and knowing retreat. It was a magnificent yet chilling scene. When weak undead creatures such as skeleton warriors and zombie were completely destroyed, those low-level souls would immediately disperse. But from hate warriors onwards, their souls wouldn't immediately disperse upon elimination. The undead creatures around them would fight to claim a part of that soul power, devouring it to strengthen themselves. From the middle of the struggle rose a 5-meter tall enormous mummy lord. Wrapped in strips strips of corroded white cloth which exuded a deathly aura. He slowly rose from deep within the ground of the canyon. This mummy lord seemed to be the leader of the undead creatures within the canyon. When he rose up from deep within the ground, his whole body unleashed an incomparable storm of death. When the undead creatures charging down from the mountain came into contact with the death storm, they immediately turned into ashes. The strips of cloth around his body danced like weapons, cutting apart any hostile creature unfortunate enough to be caught in its path. Only an evil knight that descended was able to block the attack with his bone spear, driving his fire-breathing warhorse to retreat to the side. In the hierarchy of undead creatures, mummy lords ranked higher than evil knights. As such, in skirmishes between undead creatures, a difference in level usually meant a foregone conclusion. Unless there were 10 evil knights attacking the mummy lord, this battle had no suspense in its outcome. End of part 1 of the chapter. When the mummy lord emerged from the ground, the surrounding undead creatures that had charged down from the bald mountain were ground to dust by the death storm. More than 700 undead creatures turned into ashes in moments. The being who was holding up on high ground accepted this challenge from the mummy lord Pharaoh. That mountain is not a height that can be held by someone as weak as you, so hand over the territory to me. Mummy lord Pharaoh roared at the towering mountain as a large amount of mental strength swept through the whole area. My lord majesty, how can you tolerate the transgressions of that lowly mummy? The evil knight that had retreated on his fire-breathing warhorse hissed sternly. The sounds of rocks shifting suddenly sounded from around the canyon. The incomparably familiar wood and fire elite zombie separately rode out on fire-breathing warhorses, dashing in from both sides of the valley. An enormous shadow dived down from the tops of the mountain, the incredible undead porcupine full of bone spurs. The little skeleton was wielding a bone dagger that had transformed into a spear 3 meters long. The 7 bone spurs stood upright from his spine. His grand aura covered the scene as he landed. Humble mummy lord, my territory is not a place where you can just casually trespass. Now, not only do I desire your soul's dissipation, but from today forth the north side of the mummy lord's territory is also under my control. The little skeleton's thoughts exploded out like a raging flood, completely disproportionate to its tiny figure high in the sky. My lord majesty, you must unite and rule the darkness. The evil knight that had previously spoken dismounted, going down on one knee in front of the gallant figure of the little skeleton flying high above the battlefield. His face was filled with solemn worship. This was the first time the mummy lord Pharaoh had set eyes on the rumored superb mutated skeleton. The aura exploding from the little skeleton's figure instantly terrified Pharaoh. There was also the flaming fire elite zombie seemingly tossing 2 fireballs from hand to hand while sitting on the back of the warhorse. The scorchingly high temperature caused the cold-loving mummy lord Pharaoh to feel extremely uncomfortable. Pharaoh suddenly felt like he'd fallen for a trap this time. He'd survived in this world for an extremely long time now. He wasn't like the typical trudging undead creatures around. He'd long since gained true intelligence. That bad feeling, he had solidified his decision to leave, and he attempted to return underground. However, the previously soft earth had suddenly become as hard as diamonds. Just as the mummy lord Pharaoh started to panic, the simple-minded earth elite zombie slowly emerged from the earth. Grinning at Pharaoh, it naively said, "You can't escape, right?" The previously awe-inspiring mummy lord Pharaoh suddenly realized all his escape paths had been cut off. He howled furiously, "Despicable being, you are too sinister." The little skeleton didn't respond. The undead creature beneath him suddenly dove at Pharaoh. The little skeleton lifted the 3-meter-long bone spear, the baleful aura in the surroundings surging into the bone spear. The bone spear absorbed a large amount of deathly aura, becoming as heavy as a mountain. As it pierced towards Pharaoh, the mummy lord threw back his head in a roar of defiance. The strips of cloth on Pharaoh's body danced as it crushed everyone within its range. But when the little skeleton's bone spear descended, it tore straight through the strips wrapped around his body, piercing through to his chest in one strike, pinning him to the ground. "Submit or die!" the little skeleton coldly shouted as his huge aura fiercely bombarded every inch of the mummy lord pinned by the bone spear. Unable to struggle loose, Pharaoh yielded to the little skeleton's viciousness. After a mournful howl, he docilely bent his head to the little skeleton and said, "I, mummy lord Pharaoh, submit to my lord." The little skeleton wasn't in a hurry to remove the bone spear from the mummy lord's body. He drew a contract mark in the dusky air with his free left hand, making the mummy lord hand over some of his soul to brand the contract. Only then did he remove the bone spear without concern for the Mummy Lord's pain, turning around and saying, "Return to the mountain." The Mummy Lord didn't have any chance to resist now that the one-sided master and servant contract was formed. He struggled to his feet, lumbering off with slow steps behind the earth and would delete zombies, his goal clearly the towering mountain. Han Shao had seen everything clearly and was filled with surprise. He finally knew where he was at this time. This was the other dimension in which the undead creatures lived. Han Shao never would have imagined that the little skeleton and earth zombie would actually have an enormous troop in the other dimension. It even looked like they were getting on rather well. No wonder the earth elite zombie had asked to return last time if there wasn't anything for him. Looking at this battle, it seemed that the little skeleton had brought along the earthwood and fire elite zombies and was conducting a mighty invasion in the other dimension. A high-level undead creature like the Mummy Lord could only be summoned by a necromancer archmage similar to the bone demons. Yet the little skeleton had handled the Mummy Lord with a single strike. This fully proved that the little skeleton's level was higher than the Mummy Lord. This was something that Han Shao never would have thought of. When the Mummy Lord was subdued by the little skeleton, Han Shao suddenly panicked. He suddenly remembered that he didn't know how to return to the profound continent. There weren't any people or things that Han Shao was familiar with in this eternally desolate and still space. If he could only remain in this foreign netherworld in his consciousness, it would be complete torture to Han Shao. At present even his body was formed by his consciousness, so not only could Han Shao not control anything, he couldn't cast any magic either. This was an extremely unfavorable situation for Han Shao. Looking at the little skeleton fly towards the towering bald mountain, Han Shao repeatedly screamed mentally in an attempt to contact the little skeleton. In the midst of that, a sharp pain suddenly spread across Han Shao's whole body. This kind of agony was unbearable even to Han Shao's tough nerves. As a result, his consciousness gradually dissipated. The little skeleton, who was traveling towards the towering mountain with the elite zombies, suddenly paused, looking towards the area where Han Shao's consciousness vanished. He suddenly turned the flying undead creature and flew towards the area where Han Shao's consciousness had just been. The purple demon eye sparkled, filled with uncertainty. The earthwood and fire elite zombies all spurred their fire-breathing war horses to pass through the ranks of the undead army to stand next to the little skeleton. The earth elite zombie asked innocently, "What's wrong?" Father was here. The little skeleton, who only had 2 holes for a nose, moved with a crunching noise and responded to the 3 special undead creatures. "How can Father be here? This is our world." The earth zombie looked naively at the little skeleton, trying to understand. "I don't know, but I just felt the connection between Father and myself. He was just here." The little skeleton swung the 3-meter bone lance in his hand, the tip of the bone lance stopping at the area where Han Shao's consciousness previously stayed, saying, "Right here. If you sniff carefully, you can still smell Father's scent." With this sentence from the little skeleton, the 3 undead creatures all drew close to the area. Among them, the wood and fire elite zombies shook their heads, having yet to fully develop their own consciousness. They currently could only rely on the little skeleton to think. Only the earth zombie deeply breathed in a few breaths of air, as if really smelling Han Shao's scent. It replied while shaking its head, "Yes, Father has truly been here. Let's return to the mountain. Father has already left. We still need to take over Pharaoh's territories later," said the little skeleton, and then spurred the undead creature into the sky, howling as he made his way to the towering mountain. Han Shao shot to his feet as if his head had been struck by lightning. When he landed on the ground, he was covered in a cold sweat, his heart still palpitating with fear. The skeletal staff that was in his hand fell to the ground at this moment. It rattled as it bounced on the smooth, hard ground of the cemetery of death. There weren't any changes to the skeletal staff that was now quietly lying on the ground. However, Han Shao knew that the skeletal staff had just brought him to another place. Traveling to the desolate and still dimension had given Han Shao a scare. What Han Shao was afraid of wasn't the existence of an war in the other dimension. Instead, he was scared that he couldn't return to the profound continent. He had existed only as a consciousness in that paradise for necromancy, but his body had remained on the profound continent. The effect on a necromancer like Han Shao was obvious. He was unable to use much of his power there. If he was stuck eternally in that area facing desolate and deathly undead creatures for the rest of his life would be akin to torture to Honsha-O. Being used to the riotous colors of this world, Honsha-O couldn't easily adapt to the monochromatic other dimension. Besides, this world still had Honsha-O's close friends who were made of flesh and blood like Honsha-O. Unlike the creatures in the other dimension that was closed, this skeletal staff is really odd. Luckily it finally sent me back. If not, my life would have been destroyed. Honsha-O spoke to himself for a while. Only then did he look at the skeletal staff again. His mind was thinking furiously as to how he had passed through the various layered planes with his consciousness landing in that space. Unfortunately, even after pondering for a long while, Honsha-O still didn't know how he'd done so. Shaking his head, Honsha-O didn't carry on thinking about this question. He instead recalled the little skeleton's amazing performance in that space. Honsha-O wanted to immediately use the skeletal staff to summon the little skeleton over, but had a lingering fear of the skeletal staff's previous changes. He temporarily gave up on the thought of immediately summoning the little skeleton. Who knew the little skeleton was actually so well established? He looks even more awesome than me in the profound continent. When did this fellow become so formidable? Honsha-O couldn't resist sighing when he remembered the scene where the little skeleton had landed and the looks of fear from a few of the low-level creatures. He finally understood what was going on. Chapter 350, The excited dark dragon. Honsha-O, who just returned from the necromancer's dimension, spent the next couple of days recovering. After he was fully rested, he went to the dark forest and caught a few magic beasts, continuing to practice the trembling soul magic. After a few days of practice, Honsha-O was finally able to manipulate his mental strength at will. When a trembling soul spell was fired, a wild beast would simply fall down, blood flowing from its nose and mouth. When Honsha-O could control trembling soul as he began studying spells that higher ranked necromancers should be proficient in. The most important matters were the summoning spells for bone demons, old phase zombies and mummy lords. As necromancers progress, not only would the level of their summoned creatures grow higher, but they would also be able to summon other kinds of creatures. Necromancy archmages like Honsha-O should be able to call forth bone demons, old phase zombies and mummy lords. In reality, apart from a few differences in the incantations, there weren't many differences between summoning the three. Even though their soul brands were different, the strength required to summon any one of them were roughly the same. As long as Honsha-O mastered summoning bone demons, he would then be able to summon the other two undead creatures just by slightly modifying the incantation. Although just like the trembling soul spell, the farther a necromancer progressed, the harder the advanced spells would become to master. Honsha-O's understanding of necromancy magic from the deceased archmage Clayton was now useless. Starting from this realm, Honsha-O would have to carefully study necromancy magic by himself. Luckily, the Cemetery of Death had many books that Honsha-O could peruse. The number of references concerning the essence of necromancy were too many to count. As the 3 evil knights and 12 mystical demons were still being refined, Honsha-O used this time to study more advanced necromancy magic. The days flew by. One day, Honsha-O suddenly sensed a familiar presence outside the Cemetery of Death whilst chanting his incantations. Suddenly awakening from his deep contemplation, Honsha-O held the skeleton staff as he walked out of the Cemetery of Death, running into Dark Dragon Gilbert wondering outside. "What are you doing here, esteemed master? I felt your presence and it just so happened that I was in the Valley of Sunshine. Hence I came over to find you." Dark Dragon Gilbert cheered up when he saw Honsha-O appear. Gilbert hadn't seemed to have undergone any great changes. However, Honsha-O could feel from Gilbert's body that his aura seemed to have strengthened a little. After Gilbert walked into the Cemetery of Death, he immediately began chattering, reporting on what had happened in the Valley of Sunshine. Honsha-O gradually came to understand the situation in Valley of Sunshine from Gilbert's stories. Ever since Honsha-O had previously schemed against the various powers that had converged on the Hidden Valley with the Mithril Mine, the 4 great powers had formed a temporary truce. Instead, they focused all their attention on crusading against the culprit behind the scenes. Lord had previously said that whichever faction was the first to find the culprit behind the scenes would hold power in the Valley of Sunshine, so all the powers, large or small, were trying to find the culprit behind the scenes. However, Even after so many months there was still no results. Trunks understood that the real culprit Han Shao had long since left the valley. Towards this issue he pretended to express concern but also silently expanded the Soul Destroyer mercenary band. Unwittingly the silent and unknown Soul Destroyers had gradually become the fifth great power in Valley of Sunshine thanks to its abundant funds and Trunks' prestige. Having consumed one of Han Shao's rebirth pills, Trunks' strength had advanced from Sword Master to Great Sword Master. Out of all the different factions in the Valley of Sunshine, only Lorden, who could go thrice berserk, could beat him. Florida and Adam Malo were both inferior to Trunks. This period of time was the Soul Destroyer's chance to rise. As they shot through the ranks of their peers they absorbed even more outstanding experts. Trunks' previous ruthlessness now had an added edge of insidiousness to it. He wasn't in a hurry to immediately deal with Florida, intending to slowly torment him a bit at a time. Gilbert took on some missions with Trunks, completing every operation perfectly. In this process Gilbert frequently visited many brothels, using the skills that Han Shao taught him to secretly absorb some yin energy. Thus, his strength also rapidly improved. After he finished listening to Gilbert narrate the situation in the Valley of Sunshine, Han Shao was actually slightly worried. Currently Trunks' Soul Destroyers were the fifth greatest power in the Valley of Sunshine. This also meant that Soul Destroyers had the right to participate in the fight for the leadership over the Valley of Sunshine. Previously, when the Soul Destroyers didn't have this level of strength, only Florida would spare no effort in suppressing him. Now that the Soul Destroyers truly had such strength, the other three sides naturally would place more attention on Trunks. Even the Berserker warriors Lorden would unfortunately not be as friendly to Trunks as he previously was. After all, Trunks possessed the strength to threaten his Kyra mercenary band. There were no friends who were forever in this world. Once there was a clear conflict of interest, it was very possible that some dirty things would happen. Han Shao contemplated for a while, understanding in his heart that Trunks and the rest would perhaps find it more difficult to develop in the future. However, Han Shao believed in Trunks' ability and didn't care too much about this. After thinking for a while he smiled slightly and said to Dark Dragon Gilbert, "I have something for you." "What is it?" After Gilbert explained the details of the situation in the Valley of Sunshine to Han Shao, he was surprised by Han Shao's response. Han Shao took the Green Dragon's magical core from his space ring, lustrous green energy whirling within. The massive amount of energy contained within immediately caused Gilbert to go mad with joy, loudly screaming with delight, "A supreme magical core? That's right. This is a Green Dragon's magical core. I believe this magical core should be useful to you." Han Shao grinned at Gilbert and asked. Unable to stop nodding his head like a chicken pecking rice, Gilbert was tremendously excited, his right hand already holding up the Green Dragon's magical core in his palm, laughing boisterously. "Useful. Too useful. I can feel the enormous energy contained within. With this Green Dragon magical core that's of a higher rank than me, I can definitely evolve to the second level." "That's good. Swallow it immediately and just evolve in the Cemetery of Death." This Green Dragon's magical core had obviously been specially prepared by Han Shao for Gilbert. Seeing Gilbert looking surprised and excited to the point of madness, he smiled. Apart from his lewdness, Gilbert could also be considered a loyal follower. Previously in the Taboo Land deep within the Dark Forest, he displayed loyalty that had touched Han Shao. If not Han Shao, who was berserk at that time, perhaps would have been lost forever. "Thank you, Master." "Master, you are too great." "Your loyal servant praises you from the bottom of his heart." Gilbert sang unceasing praises as he clutched the Green Dragon's magical core. Gilbert had interacted with humans for a long period of time. During this time, his bootlicking skills had greatly improved and he almost didn't repeat a single sentence. All right, just swallow the Green Dragon's magical core for me." "Less of that nonsense." Han Shao interrupted Gilbert's fawning, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Gilbert stopped his nonsense this time, animatedly nodding his head and speaking to Han Shao. "Master, I need to transform to my original form, which might be inconvenient in the Cemetery of Death. I'll just proceed outside." "Go, but you need to be careful. Don't mess up the formation I set up," Han Shao frantically reminded him as Gilbert rushed excitedly for the entrance of the Cemetery of Death, the Green Dragon's magical core in hand. "Be at ease, Master. I know what I should be doing," Gilbert replied, greatly conveniently avoiding the two large formations Han Shao had set up. He only swallowed the green dragon's magical core after reaching another area. It looked like Gilbert would be able to become a level 2 super magical beast in the near future, Han Shao mused. He decided to continue studying necromancy and practice incantations in the Cemetery of Death. A few days passed when Han Shao suddenly thought of the dwarves in the valley. Thinking of the dwarves' skills in forging weapons and remembering his promise to ancient Lizard King Dagasi, he departed the Cemetery of Death, traveling to the valley where the dwarves resided. Winter had passed and the dwarves' valley was filled with a fresh smell of flora. The dwarves guarding the valley all recognized Han Shao. Han Shao smoothly entered the dwarf village, seeing a few dwarves brewing fruit wine. When the dwarves that were brewing wine saw Han Shao appear, all of them cheered endlessly regardless of adults or children. Encouraged by a woman, a dwarf child less than a meter tall walked toward Han Shao with a glass filled with fruity smelling wine. "Uncle Han, this is for you, as very delicious." This dwarf child stood on his tiptoes handing over the glass filled with wine to Han Shao. Kneeling down, Han Shao rubbed the little dwarf child's head and received the glass with a smile. "Thank you." The dwarf child's smiling face blushed as he shyly ran to his mother's side and said, "Uncle Han thanked me." The honest dwarves, no matter young or old, all roared with laughter. The village was filled with a cheerful atmosphere. It looked like the dwarves had been living pretty well during this period of time. When Bennett, who had heard the news and saw that Han Shao had arrived, he shouted from afar, "Yo Han, it's been a long time since you've came." He'd been forging weapons just now and was naked from the waist up. His face was covered in soot and he was holding a large mallet in his left hand. "Hee, I've been a bit busy recently." "Have you all been well recently?" Han Shao asked smilingly. "Of course, spring has arrived. We haven't even finished the food you provided us for the winter. There's still a lot of bacon. We've mined some more and I was just instructing the youngsters in the dwarf weapon forging skills. Life is much better than it was previously." Bennett chuckled as he replied, looking visibly refreshed. "Where's the village chief?" "I've come to discuss a large deal with you all." "Han, the gates to the dwarf village are forever open for you. To forge weapons for you is an honor for the dwarves and doesn't count as business." Chief Calvin leaned on a cane as he stroked his braided beard with a beaming smile, walking out from a distant stone house. Calvin looked visibly older and his body was getting weaker. When one reached a specific age, struggles with walking were inevitable. Calvin's beard was fully silver now and he had to rely on a cane. It looked like he similarly couldn't resist the effects of aging. However, Calvin was in high spirits and his chuckling look made him seem full of benevolence. When two young dwarves saw Calvin appearing, they took the initiative to go up and support the chief. Bennett asked Elder, "Why have you come out?" "Han is here, of course. I have to come visit." "Bennett, I'm not as old as you think. Don't you see I walked over on my own?" "Hey." Calvin laughed and bowed toward Han Shao. "The dwarves in this village will forever thank you for your favor. There's no business between friends. We will forge all the weapons you need. This is our attitude towards friends." When he'd come over this time, Han Shao had primarily wanted the dwarves to help forge some weapons for the lizardmen in the underground world. Han Shao promised ancient Lizard King Dagasi to help look after the lizardmen. Although the lizardmen had obtained some weapons from the corpses of the Redbud Knights, those weapons were far from enough for their use. In addition, lizardmen were built differently than normal humans. Han Shao wanted to ask the dwarves to forge them some weapons tailored for their use. Of course, Bretel City's city guards also needed the dwarven forged weapons. This was because the weapons forged by the dwarves were much more outstanding than normal weapons. Calvin listened carefully to Han Shao's descriptions. When Han Shao finished, Calvin smiled as he said, "Don't worry. The children are coincidentally very free recently. We still have enough food currently and don't need to hunt. I will make arrangements for them to forge the weapons you need." "Many thanks, Elder." Han Shao sincerely expressed his gratitude. "Haha, there's no need for such polite words between friends. It's rare for you to have come. Do try out our freshly brewed fruit wine," Calvin proudly said, pulling Han Shao towards the women brewing wine.